quick plug, and I'll let you go. I can personally attest to what David is saying, that I've made this exact same mistake and hopefully learn from it. But also, let me make a plug for a presentation that will be given on December 2nd, again as part of this class, by a good friend of mine who actually did this successfully, Martin H. He's, I can't pronounce his last name, he's German, he's got a long name, but he was a PhD student when I met him over a decade ago, and he took his technology to a company and in Germany, of all places, which is not very friendly for startups, or it didn't used to be, nowadays it's changed, and took it all the way to an exit. So I just want to make a quick plug for it. And so if I will put that link to that webinar to all of you, anyone who's interested in joining. Anyway, Beth, it's yours.
I was going to say something for those who have not been an entrepreneur and may not completely understand or not been a professor. If you've worked in a corporation, and particularly you have engineers in your class. So if you've been an engineer in a corporation and you know anyone who has gone from being a technical hands-on, maybe even a software developer or somebody like that, and then all of a sudden they're in management. So I recall this, my first job as a chemist was with Dow Corning, so in a larger corporation. And at the time, they were extremely rare. They had a technical track and they had a management track, because they recognized that people would be promoted into management, engineers and scientists would be promoted into management, not have the skill set, not have the interest, and then fail. So they've taken these excellent science people and basically not getting value out of them, and everybody's unhappy. So they created this technical track. And that's what it's like. You are your professor and you're now going into something that's completely new and you need a whole new skill set, and it is not easy to get. I remember when I made that transition. I mean, part of it was I got an MBA to help me make that transition, but I'd already made the transition into management, and then the MBA helped me learn a lot of other things on top of it.
But may I also dig in a little bit, because most of our audience are students. So how would what you just said apply to students? Because that would probably your personal experience as well, right? Because you were a student, you're an engineer, and you successfully transitioned into a very successful CEO. So could you give some advice? Because most of the audience are actually students, not professors.
Right. So I think the clearest thing is, when you're a student, you jump around to courses that are very different. And you know that when you're in your thermodynamics course, if you've taken that, if you're, my master's was in thermodynamics, so that pops into my head. So if you're in your thermodynamics course, the way you approach a problem and those sorts of things, and the content and the knowledge that you're applying and how you're being assessed, they're very different from when you're getting your sociology requirement, or your physical ed requirement, or one of those liberal artsy things that you have to do. And I mean, I remember the shock, right? Going, and I had to take swimming. I'm like, swimming? I'm with non-scientists. It's not math. It's not science. It's weird. And I'm sure Lisa can sort of relate to this as well. And that's how it is. And you have to find that you have to do things in a very different way, and you're being assessed differently, and how you define success and what you do to be successful is different.
So add to that a little bit from my perspective. So when I was in engineering school, I loved the technology, and to be honest, when I looked around, the people who are in engineering and the sciences, to be honest, overall, in my arrogant assessment at that time, had and probably maybe it's true, had higher IQs than the people who are in liberal arts. I mean, that's just what you think when you're going through engineering.
You just got canceled by a lot of people.
That's right. Lisa just canceled me.
Right? Is that
liberal arts major?
Well, then I realized later on that the people with those liberal arts degrees they were in management and upper management, and they were making the decision based on technology that me and the other geeks were inventing. And I decided, you know what, I'd rather be in that other role. Whereas some people would prefer to stay inventing the technology and making those cutting edge, creations and inventions and really get a lot out of that. But I personally felt once I got in my career that I wanted to be one of the decision makers. And it was a hard decision to let go of being part of inventing and creating to switch to that, because but that's more EQ than IQ. If that makes sense in terms of the different roles. And it's a decision for everyone. You can still, in engineering though, become a chief technical officer, right? You can still be part of a senior management team. That skill set though, unless you truly develop the EQ around it and are able to let other people do the development, you're probably not ideal for a CEO candidate though.
Yeah, and EQ, for those in the audience who may not know what EQ is emotional quotient. And so your emotional intelligence, all the Daniel Goleman maybe, I think is this.
So it is.
Thank you, Kevin. And as opposed to IQ.
Yeah, I'm the drama queen, so I have the EQ and no IQ. And David, I want to come to your point, but I want to ask Kevin. So Kevin, you and I are friends, right? I'm the liberal arts major. You got the science background. Since we're friends, does that make us a great team?
No. I think it's the mix of, you need all those qualities on a team. I don't think you shouldn't pick a team based on friendship. You should pick a team based on capabilities. That's how I see things. I think the friendships evolve, but I think, I've seen some failures. A team of 3 that were all friends got on board, started a company. One person had an idea where they wanted to take it. The other 2 didn't. And they ultimately ended up blowing up, 3 years into it. And a lot of resentment to their friendship that they actually stopped being friends after that. Because, from the get-go, they didn't have the time to get together and actually decide what they wanted out of the venture. And they went into it with varied opinions, didn't address it. And it was ugly. And it really hurt a lot of friendships, all 3 of them. So
it's not impossible to stay friends after a business venture, but it sure makes it a lot harder.
And I think that the idea, if you are going to go into a business with friends, the most important thing is to have the open and honest conversations early about issues such as equity, who's going to be in charge, how are we going to run the company, all of that on the table early so that you can have those hard conversations, which having those hard conversations early prevents the failure of friendships later.
Completely. So there's
one thing I could add to that is, which someone talked about earlier, right? When we talked about when there were some mistakes. So getting things in writing and reading legal documents, and if that means involving an attorney and paying an attorney for a few hours of time, don't underestimate the importance of that. I actually have one of my biggest mistakes in my career is in the business, being involved with people who I was friends with and trusted. And so I didn't feel the need to get things in writing. And then later on, years later, things change. People maybe intentionally or not so intentionally don't remember what was verbally agreed to. And I got burned by it. So I encourage you, no matter if you know someone really well or if you don't, you still always get anything that's important to a business or to you personally in writing.
Yeah, that company I was part of when I made the 200K mistake, they had said, don't worry, everybody's going to become millionaires. Well, they each got $10 million, bankrupted the company, and nobody got anything else. So David, you and Lisa were putting stuff in the chat. I want to draw people's attention to it for a couple of minutes. That idea about various roles and how engineers make for great contributors to the business process, even if it doesn't mean, the leader of a company or something like that.
What's your question?
Do you want to talk a little bit about how you've seen engineers really succeed in business roles, marketing or otherwise?
Yeah. So the text has some stuff about marketing, and then Lisa threw something up there which is kind of sales, and those are different. Marketing and sales. Marketing is figuring out how to sell to the whole market and what your segment looks like and who your buyers will be. Sales are then going and then talking to those individuals and getting the actual sale. You see how they kind of go hand in glove, but they're a little bit different.
One is to whom should we sell and how, and one is I'm selling.
Yeah, exactly. So the marketing folks, the marketing, the people who have an engineering background who go into marketing are way better than the liberal artsy types, in my experience, simply because they don't have any real problems documenting their assumptions, figuring out a way to test them, and then adjusting, right? If we think our market is going to be, women between 25 and 35, and then they do their test marketing, and it's really between, 30 and 40, they just go. Whereas some of the liberal artsy folks will say, no, that must be wrong. Let's go test again. Okay. But so I think the engineers have been extraordinarily good in my experience in that with marketing. Now they have to have a skill set which is complementary to what you learn in engineering school, but the way they think and the way they approach problems is very, very useful. But building upon what Lisa put in the text, when I've had highly technical products that need to be sold, somebody with an engineering or a technical background is truly invaluable but then you have to be able to sell and have the technical background. That's a rare combination. They're like gold. If you find one of them, take really good care of them because they're gold.
And encourage them
but
to
it's
work
not
on commission.
common. It's not common at all to have the people that can be the quantitative analytical, but also have the ability to create lots of shallow relationships. So and be a good salesperson, in my opinion. If you can find them, God, don't let them go away. They're great.
My experience might be a little different. So my experience is pretty much exclusively in the life science area. And so in life sciences, right, when you're developing a medical technology where your customers, not always, but are largely going to be physicians who themselves are very science oriented and very technical themselves, it matches very well to have people with the engineering background who have at least been part of the design and development process at some point, or at the minimum, right, truly understand it and really understand how a product works, because those people interacting with physicians who sometimes tend to shy away from the very salesy type people, right, who have shallow relationships because they themselves don't connect with and feel uncomfortable with those personalities. So when you match them up with someone who's an engineer who also happens to have good communication skills, it makes an excellent match, both in marketing a product and in selling a product, because at least in certain areas in medical technologies, you don't necessarily need to have what we typically think of as, salesperson skills, right? And those shallow relationships. You end up with really great salespeople and marketing people who develop strong relationships and who are more technical and really understand a product and have a much better understanding of how their customers are using it. And those particular customers really gravitate and form good, solid relationships with those individuals.
So Lisa, have you found it easier to take people who have good sales skills and teach them the technology, or the reverse? Take the technology and teach them the sales skills?
The reverse. And maybe in some areas you can go in both directions, but I have not. What I've found is that people who have good sales skills, if you try to have them sell an implantable medical device to clinicians, it's never going to work very well, because they just try to pick up on a few key words. But then when a clinician wants to talk more deeply about a disease state or about really how the device works and why it works that way, they can't go that deep. They just don't have the background to be able to do that. And someone who is an engineer, even if they didn't design and develop that product, they still intuitively talk to the engineer who did, and they have that knowledge and understanding. And they're also less likely to cover up and be arrogant. They're more likely to say, to your point, hey, you know what, I don't know, but let me get the data, let me get that information. And they're much more amenable to just getting to the right answer rather than them being right. And that really resonates with clinicians who desperately need the right information in order to use a product correctly so that they don't harm a patient.
Oh, thank you for that. We have about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to do something. I'm going to ask a question, get all of your views. Maybe we'll go in a different order. So maybe Kevin, then Beth, then Lisa, then David. And then Rajesh, you get the last, wrap-up question. Most of the people we work with in this capacity here, they will charge anywhere from maybe $400 to $1,000 an hour for their advice. And we have now, right, 30 seconds. Kevin, what's the one question you always want somebody to ask you, but they don't, so that you can give them advice? Well, we'll ask that of everybody. And I put you on the spot first, like I did Beth earlier. Sort of, if I'm paying you $1,000 an hour, give me 30 seconds, 45 seconds of what I should be paying for. What nugget do you have?
I think I would gravitate towards, am I in love with the invention or the idea before it's ready to go, or does it really have a commercial application?
All right, Beth?
That was exactly what I was going to say, Kevin. So I'm going to pick a different one. And that was exactly what I was going to say. Is there a market for it? I would say, can it be done at a cost that people are willing to pay, which is more specific to what Kevin is saying. But that people don't think that way. It's what Rajesh said. You can do it. It's technically possible. But it has to do with cost, and it has to do with price. And what the market's willing to bear.
And to that point, hopefully I don't steal Lisa's, in healthcare in particular, there's the patient who uses it. There's often somebody else who pays for it, a parent, a spouse, this or that. And then there's the insurance company who is totally different in another layer. So even knowing who pays, let alone what they're willing to pay. Lisa. Mute.
Oh, we can't hear you, Lisa.
Muted.
With my venture hat on, the first thing I always want to know and want someone to ask me if they want my help is, let's figure out who's going to buy this and why they would want to buy it.
Motivations, right? Sometimes they're first movers, and so you can charge them 3 times as much and they don't care because they just want to be the first to have it. I'm the opposite. I'm going to be the last to have it. My iPhone's like a 4 still, because I don't trade up my iPhone. Right? I use it actually for phone calls. David, $1,000, 30 seconds. What do we got?
I usually find it's useful to ask the person, what have I forgotten to ask you that you think is really important? And then you can then whatever their answer is, I don't really care what the answer is. I just want to know what they're focused on.
Sort of what I did, isn't it? So what you're saying is always end with, what did I forget to ask you, because you know what's important to the person.
Well, likewise, if you're kind of interviewing them to figure out whether they're coachable or whether they have an idea or whether they're focused on the right things, you give them an open-ended one to let them go that way, and you get a lot of insight into how they think, much more than just asking a directed question.
That's awesome. All right, Rajesh.
Wow, thank you. I mean, this is amazing. I'm kind of out of words, but I would just add by saying, I think we got an overview of some great thinking and minds in the, currently in the battlefield to some extent. And hopefully, and I'm pretty sure this is very inspiring to all of the students here. And I guess, in the interest of time, I'm just going to say thank you so much for all your time and we could go on. We should have another panel. I think that's my conclusion from this, because there's so much more to talk about. But Paul, Kevin, Beth, Lisa, and David, thanks so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And Paul, do you want to say anything about how the students could get in touch with the Pivot Center, and if they want to take this to the next step, because many of them are thinking about innovations, hopefully will go and start companies, will almost certainly go work in corporate culture. So I think any resources you want to share?
Yep, absolutely. Our website, pivotcenter.utah.edu, there will be a major refresh of that website in the coming couple of days. And it will be stakeholder centric. So if you go again in a week, maybe, and it should be fantastic. For engineering professors or non-engineering professors, they'll be on there too. We tend to focus on faculty, staff, and anyone who's paid by the university. We engage with them. Student entrepreneurs often go to Lassonde, but we work really closely with Lassonde. So if you come here and you should be there, we'll tell you, they'll do the opposite. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I can navigate and get you to, whether it's Kevin, David, Beth, Lisa, or somebody, on staff will take care of you. So don't hesitate to reach out at all. I'm paul.corson@utah.edu.
Awesome. And again, thank you everyone for your time. This has been fantastic, and hopefully we'll do it again very soon. There's lots of things to discuss here.
Excellent. Thank you,
Thank you all.
Rajesh.
Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Best of luck, everyone.